Welcome to Destination Charging, a podcast by PowerDot, your insight into the future of sustainable mobility. Join us as we explore the different perspectives of those who are accelerating the world towards a greener future.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Destination Charging.
Glad to be here.
Tell us a bit more about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? And where does this interest in EVs comes from?
Well, I'm Felix. And the thing is that I've been biking around Amsterdam my whole life. So my bike is my vehicle. And it's funny because I got this early introduction to electric mobility already when in Amsterdam there was this shared program called Car2Go. And around a decade ago, they came with electric smart cars in Amsterdam. And by accident, I got into this rally that I could join and drive all day with this car. And they promised me a real electric car. And I was super disappointed to get the smart because they were saying there was a Zoe or a Leaf, cars that were very special at the time. So I thought, the smart, is that even a car? But I was so surprised already that day, now 10 years ago, I think last month it was, then all day I could be driving around with that thing all around Amsterdam and then even beyond. And I was so surprised that we kept going. At the end of the day, we could still speed through the tunnel at full throttle. I had a friend of mine with me in the car, and we both signed up for the Car2Go service that day. And that was already like this first change of, okay, I'm this IT guy in Amsterdam doing my work on my bike. But then I knew, okay, this electric mobility, there's something going here that I need to figure out. And for many years, I've been traveling around Europe with diesel cars because they were the most expensive, most cheap to rent. And the funny thing is that I even went to Germany to get them. And nowadays, there were some special deals in Germany with EVs that I was going for. And I was reading this blog back in the day by a guy who's running this Laadpas Top 10 website in the Netherlands. And he was writing about these special charging deals. So I found out that, this charging thing, there's actually a lot of weird stuff going on that nobody knows about. And I was following this car rental company that had Teslas in this fleet as the first company in the Netherlands. And what happened is that they had this special Christmas newsletter where they offered an electric motorbike ride. And I won a day on that electric motorbike. This was 6 years ago now. And this motorbike could already do fast charging back then. And that really changed my life because I went to Fastnet on the way back from the beach. I plugged it in. I waited for maybe 15 minutes and I could do full speed again to home. And ever looking back at the day, I just had the motorbike for one afternoon. And I just looked back at it and I just couldn't believe what happened, that there was this motorbike out there that could just go anywhere because of these fast chargers. And that became a life-changing moment because I just wanted to know what is going on with this fast charging business. Why don't I know more about this? Why I didn't even know electric motorbikes existed before I received that newsletter and I accidentally won the trip. So I decided to rent that motorbike, travel to Switzerland to just figure out if I could do it. Like the owner of the rental place, he really was such an enthusiast that it was easy to believe that I could do it. And that trip was made possible by a company called Lidl, which operated some fast chargers in what I like to call the charging desert of northern France. Because back in those days, like 5 years ago, you could not travel on that route with that motorbike that needed those chargers unless you used the Lidl chargers. There was nothing else around. And I became obsessed with figuring out where are these chargers, who's operating them, why is it so unevenly spread around Europe. This all kickstarted from a tiny Instagram page to a blog, to my LinkedIn, to my Twitter. And it all got a bit out of hand, and now we're here.
Awesome. I'm curious to know, because you were talking about these early day experiences. I think there's two things that I find very interesting. One is the almost the sharing, or the necessity for you to share with others that experience. I think it might have started with the Instagram page, but then it expanded to these sort of guides that you were building to help people travel across Europe using their EVs. So that's one part of it. And then the second part of it is you had very early on this notion of the importance of the charging infrastructure. So obviously, like, if you think about EVs or the EV culture, there's always a lot of conversation about cars, but not necessarily the infrastructure that needs to be there for these cars to be useful, helpful, available to be used. So let's explore these two blocks throughout the conversation today. First off, what sort of sparked that idea of you sharing your experience and trying to help others out doing something similar?
Yeah, there were a couple of layers to it. First of all, that motorbike was so special that I just couldn't believe, I didn't understand why I was riding on this super bike that was I had a petrol motorbike at the time. This was way faster. It was cheaper to ride, obviously way more expensive to buy. But I mean, let's forget about that for a second. And I just couldn't believe that I didn't know. I am a geek.
Mm-hmm.
I like to try new things. I like tech. I'm reading up on these things, and I didn't even know that it existed. So that it triggered me to share that this was happening, that you could do this. Accidentally, there was this rental company that suddenly, instead of the diesel cars that I used to rent there, they had the Jaguar I-Pace for rent. And this was a special vehicle at the time because there was a crazy tax incentive in the Netherlands, which made it happen that half of all of those Jaguars in the first year they were released, all of them in the world were actually sold in the Netherlands. So there was this huge community that I joined on Facebook because I was doing these road trips for the last decade already around Europe. I was really looking for that vehicle that could help me do road trips. And I noticed that many of these people buying these Jaguars, they were, even though they were using this vehicle on a day-to-day basis, and I wasn't, they were absolutely not convinced that they should use this to travel with and whatever. And I specifically rented it to travel with and whatever. And what was even funnier is that the rental company had this deal with Jaguar Netherlands that they offered these people a petrol car for their holidays, so they didn't need to use their Jaguar. So this all made me go even more vocal. Like, no, don't rent this petrol shit. We need to travel with the EV. I didn't tell you that the first time I rented a car to do a trip with was an i3 that I took to Paris with a friend. And that trip, I will never forget it, because as soon as we crossed even the Dutch-Belgian border, which isn't that far from Amsterdam, we immediately ran into strange things happening. Just, chargers in Belgium already work less reliable than I ever experienced before. And then when we came to France, it got even worse. So that trip taught me, okay, we arrived in the middle of the night in Paris. I realized that to make people cross France safely in an EV, okay, if I cannot find this guide to help you do that, then I will write it. And it was the only guide that I offered for free, because I really wanted everybody to accomplish their goal of traveling through France. And because I really felt that you could actually just end up with a dead battery in France, because that is how bad the infrastructure was. But I'm talking 5 years ago.
Okay. And so I think you're tying in the second part of the question, which is the importance of infrastructure, right?
Yeah, so that was really triggered by the motorbike.
Yeah.
Because it taught me from day one that a very small battery could get you very far. Okay. I just took it to Switzerland immediately. And even though, it was a long day, of course, and whatever, but the tiny battery is not a problem, because you can fast charge it. Because and it's really the infrastructure part. That one is the deciding factor if you can do a trip or not. Yeah, you can. This idea of building bigger batteries. Obviously, we're now at this point where some luxury brands are offering crazy batteries that could almost go into a truck. I mean, not the American truck, but the delivery truck, and then put them in a car, and you can take this car very far, very nice. But the thing is that if we have the right infrastructure, nobody needs a really big battery because, or 95% of vehicle users are obviously on a day-to-day basis. They're not traveling that far. So it doesn't make any sense for most vehicles to have these huge batteries, because if we simply had the right infrastructure in place, we could go anywhere with any battery. And I'm still thankful for the motorbike experience, because that was so clearly showing that you could easily do this. And that's also something that I learned with the motorbike. Like, riding 100 instead of 120, it has a huge impact on consumption. And then if you compare it to what it can do charging wise, you can simply, the lessons you learn while driving electric, they teach you so much about energy and stuff. And this, it still fascinates me every day.
You actually tackled a couple of the things that most people sort of flag as the big issue when they're thinking about transitioning to an ICE to an EV, which is, first of all, that idea of range anxiety. Will I ever be able to get to my destination? Maybe I need a bigger car with a bigger battery to do so. So there's a bit of thinking in that direction. And then the other one, which I also find very interesting, which is optimizing for the exception. So you might do a trip like once, twice a year, 3 times a year, that will require you to travel 500, 600 kilometers, but you optimize for that. So I need a car to allow me to do that, and I'm not available to compromise. So to that regard, my question is more, obviously you'll have a ton of people, friends and family and friends of friends reaching out to you, considering moving to an EV. What are sort of like the few things that you tell them to be aware of? Like, are there any strategies that you recommend for them to have in a consistent basis, not only on the long road trip basis, for them to take the most value out of their cars?
Well, luckily, I had some friends who came to me with questions like these. And the i3 road trip to Paris, which was, you could tell that story as a disaster story, but it still made one of my best friends who was with me on that trip, and also in the Car2Go trip way earlier. It still made him go electric almost immediately after, because he realized that when we came back from Paris, there was this, you cross the border of Belgium and the Netherlands, and then from there on out, there will be a company called Fastnet that takes care of business. So the thing is that there are a couple of vehicles, and especially nowadays, there is this second-hand market that is developing, where a lot of people will find stuff that I have a lot of friends nowadays who maybe live 40 or 50 kilometers from work, and the funny thing is that they could buy any EV to do those kind of work trips. Just any, even an old Zoe, they could do that trip. Maybe in the middle of the winter, they really needed to charge at the office. But in the Netherlands, well, you would have to work at a very interesting office that would be in a sort of strange location, not offer charging on the way back in winter if you really need it. So by now, it gets sort of very easy. You can choose many things, but then, it starts to become very interesting. What are the special scenarios? And, if you have a family, how does the family look like? Because obviously, it's also easy to think that everybody can go into a very small car to work if they cannot go there by train, which I would obviously recommend in the Netherlands. But then, clearly, if you have a big family, then, as soon as you buy a small car to go for work, then maybe they buy an even bigger car for the holidays.
Exactly.
So that is also something I find interesting in this dynamic, that there's a lot of SUV bashing nowadays. And obviously, I can see car bloat is everywhere. Every other model being introduced. Look at minis. If you look at a mini now compared to what it looked like back in the day, can you still call this a mini? I don't know. The thing is that obviously I can also understand why people buy this. If you buy a car, that is a huge thing to do. And if you want to use that vehicle on holidays, then obviously it needs to be fit for purpose on that holiday, even though in day-to-day life you absolutely don't need a big car. And if I help a friend that is not into tech, that comes to me to ask for the right phone or ask for the right laptop and now for the right vehicle, it's not that easy, because I want them to be safe without me and without my help.
Are there like 2 or 3 things that you always ask them? Like, okay, so you're considering an EV, like, is it for your day-to-day use? Is it for long trips? Or, like, are there a few things that sort of can help you guiding like a recommendation or a couple of recommendations?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I really want to know what they do day to day and what they would do in the special occasion, because if they need cargo space, you're looking at very different vehicles than if they don't. If they have a family, you're looking at a very different vehicle than when they don't. But we're still in this phase where if you have a certain budget to buy a secondhand vehicle, which in the Netherlands, most vehicles people buy would be secondhand. I'm such a fond user of car sharing. There are more and more shared vehicles available in Amsterdam, even on 2 wheels and on 4 wheels, even more wheels. But it's still messy. So just like this charging landscape around Europe, I also realized that even on my best days, when I think, wow, electric mobility, we got it all covered, I'm driving in some smart vehicle that knows how to plan the route, I do still encounter these moments where I will be with my dad in a faraway country, and there we are, low state of charge. Maybe just recently, I visited a friend in Berlin. We arrived very late at night. I was pushing the car again to the maximum. So we arrive in Berlin with nothing, maybe 3%. And it's not nice to then park the car and not charge. But to actually find an available charger in Berlin in the middle of the night, it isn't that easy. So even I, as a freak, still encounter these moments that I realize, okay, I cannot push this onto anyone yet, because we're not there yet. There's still so much development needed. But I would say budget, space, and sort of the maximum thing that you want to do with your vehicle would be my three important points.
I was wondering, could you talk a bit about how you look at destination charging, and particularly on the long trips that you do? Could you talk a bit about how destination charging plays a role there?
Yeah, I've borrowed this sentence called "always be charging," or ABC for the insiders, which just means that if you charge whenever possible, then you will almost never be sort of hunting for that plug. That's what I love about renting and car sharing. It's such easy ways to try. And then, of course, if you have the bad experience, then we sort of lost. But I think that most people will then find out that most things are pretty easy. And the destination charging part, of course, is at the core of this. Because if all your destinations would have chargers, if these plugs would be everywhere, we would have solved the puzzle called electric mobility years ago. Yeah, it matters a lot where you are and where your average trip is going to be, how easy it will be. And destination charging, can really help. If people also, I still feel that it's so important that infrastructure is also easy to find. It's funny because growing up in Amsterdam, I've been taught by what I saw and what I did in the past, that we had so many plugs. For years ago, Amsterdam broke through 5,000 plugs, and now I think we're above 7. I grew up on this idea that we needed AC plugs everywhere to make it work, and I'm starting to see this pattern where fast chargers are becoming very normal at supermarkets in many countries. And as soon as in a village, if all the supermarkets would have some chargers, then suddenly maybe that village doesn't need so many AC chargers around. People go shopping every weekend anyway, if they can plug in then. But then you get to this very important statistics that, okay, but these chargers need to then be available when they need it. And of course, if they can see chargers everywhere, that I think will already make it so much easier for many people to even consider a change. But yeah, to happen all over Europe, all over the world, ideally, yeah, we're still some steps away, I feel.
You've been talking about your experience across Europe. Obviously, you're Dutch. You're here in the Netherlands, but you've already talked a lot about these travels that you did either to Germany or to France. What's sort of your current assessment of the EV status quo across Europe? It's unbalanced, so it's not the same everywhere. Can you paint us a picture of, like, let's say, obviously the Netherlands, you've already did a bit of that, but Germany, France, Spain, Italy, I know that you travel a bit around. What's the current scenario there?
Yeah, the funny thing is that, for example, in the Netherlands, we often get mentioned by figures or companies or whatever, and now in the I think we're closing in on 150,000 what they call semi-public plugs. We have 10 million cars in the Netherlands. So, but the funny thing is that in a country like the Netherlands, almost all of these plugs are slow or AC, and we actually don't have that many fast chargers. But yeah, it's funny that as soon as you cross the border, which was already true during my first road trips, but still true today, as soon as I cross the border into Belgium, then boom, charging becomes way more expensive, harder to find, less plugs per location. For example, if you go to France, in the last year, just if you go back 1 year from today, then the amount of fast plugs in France has tripled outside and on the highway. And the thing is that this has suddenly, nobody needs my French travel guide as I wrote it anymore, because suddenly you can drive to Spain and it doesn't matter, your vehicle doesn't matter. If you take an exit to a gas station, there will be a big charging station there with a roof, a fixed price. If you now travel through France, on average, your charging will be way cheaper than a country like Germany, which doesn't make any sense, but it's still true.
I wonder, how do you look at technologies that are more embedded within the car experience, things like auto charge? How do you see these things coming to fruition nowadays? And do you think that's potentially the way to go in terms of user experience, I mean?
Yeah, there are some interesting things going on, because you have indeed a lot of companies who've started to do their own auto charge stuff, and this is sort of charger based or app based within their own ecosystem. And then, yeah, it becomes more interesting if you're a frequent user of that ecosystem. That can be very nice or convenient, at least. And then, since I've been messing around with chargers, I heard about this thing called plug and charge. That is this, let's say, a big OEM project that obviously makes sense from their point of view. And also I understand that, the idea of that if plugging in is the only thing you need to do, that is clearly the way to go, because if there's no interaction, then there's also nothing that can go wrong, etc. But I do feel that, yeah, personally, I've always been looking for these best deals around. What got me into electric mobility partly is that the pricing was so attractive. And even today, if you hunt for the best charging prices, there are still plenty of good deals to be found. And I always wonder how that match. Of course, that is also not what the regular driver is. They just want to get on with their lives.
And if you think about other technologies that you've been seeing in the past few years coming to the EV experience, are there any that sort of like become top of mind, or things that you're particularly excited that you're seeing nowadays that are coming to the market in the next few years or next year or something like that? Is there something of notice for you?
Well, I'm not sure what will happen, because I see that with charging, we've seen some brands going 800 volt, and this has been changing the game of having cars that were very expensive and fast to be able to charge really fast, to normal family vehicles charging very fast. But then you also notice that software-wise, that needs to be matched to actually make use of the technology. But I think that, yeah, for me, I especially wonder where we're going with the software game, because, yeah, an EV is way more a computer than a combustion vehicle ever was. And even though obviously people can choose how much they want to computerize their car experience, yeah, our lives are constantly more, there's more automation going on around us, if we want it or not. So I'm wondering where that will go with mobility as well, because, yeah, of course, we might get to that world where you order a vehicle on your phone instead of, and then maybe it can self-charge, stuff like that. It is complete. But the thing is, for me, it's always interesting that I'm very cost focused myself. I want things to be affordable, because then, yeah, we can actually use it more than one person. And so there's where, yeah, I'm trying these luxury vehicles, but I'm only triggered by, okay, what can you bring down to the affordable version of this? But that is what I really like about the 800 volt charging. That came quite fast down to a price point where, yeah, if you can afford a family EV nowadays, then you can choose it to be 800 volt compatible. And especially now with vehicles coming from China, there will be even more doing this at even crazier price points. And then, yeah, for me, it's I'm also super curious about the tech around dynamic charging stuff, because I just see in a country like the Netherlands, in the past months, yeah, we had several weekends where energy, or where electricity was pretty much free. We had many weekdays in the summer where, you know, during the mid time of the day, yeah, electricity becomes either free, almost free. Sometimes you get paid to use it depending on your contract. So people living outside of the city with some solar panels can have a whole fleet of EVs charging. Yeah, stuff like this fascinates me completely, and I think that those things will get out of hand. Yeah, pretty much in the coming decade, that will go nuts. And yeah, that fascinates me, because 5 years from now, yeah, things can go way more crazy than that even.
That's amazing. I just noticed that I think there's a question that I didn't ask that needs to be asked, particularly from your point of view, which is, what's the perfect charging experience from your point of view?
I mean, yeah, I think that it depends. For me, I look for the nerdy stuff. So if there's this, nowadays the Netherlands has only, I think, 3 locations where you can do 400 kilowatt charging. Yeah, then I need to go there right away to test it. So I tried 2 out of 3 now. But it's also, yeah, we're still living in that time where that is also, I didn't expect that 5 years ago, that right now we have faster chargers than we have vehicles to use them with. So the Netherlands and many other countries have these 400 kilowatt chargers out in the street today, And there's not a single vehicle I can ride there. Well, if they would borrow me the Nevera, I could, but nobody's even showing me the Nevera at the Why are they not showing me this at the? So that's the stuff if I was the real influencer that I'm not, then I would be doing that. But anyway, most people need this experience where there is actual smartness in this infrastructure so that I don't have to worry about anything, because I want my dad to have the ultimate charging experience, which means plugging in, maybe swiping a payment or pushing one button somewhere, but really one is, I think, sort of the top already. But then things need to be taken care of and well communicated. So charging should be obvious, what's going on, how long is the expected value, push message on your phone. Very, very easy stuff, but hard to make simple for average Joe, because nowadays, if you need to download an app to have these special functions, you already lost maybe half of the audience. So less apps, more convenience, better price.
I think we're finishing up our conversation today. Obviously, on a podcast called Destination Charging, we're also very curious about destinations. So I was wondering if you could tell us about some of the most either exciting or weird or funny locations that you've actually were able to charge your vehicle. You were alluding to a trip to Italy where you had some great meals. What sort of like amazing destinations did you visit and were able to charge your car as well?
In Italy, I was super happy to be charging at the beach. There's really, in the Netherlands, you can never park at the beach anymore. In Italy, there are still villages where you can ride to the beach of the village, and then in the best parking spot you can think of there in the marina, there would be this charger. And then in a month like September when I was there, I could just choose the spot. Nobody was blocking these kind of perfect spot. I'm always so scared of them being blocked, and they weren't. So to charge with a view like this, I think for always close to the sea in the mountains, those locations are the best.
Thank you, Felix, for joining us and sharing your insights. Follow Felix across Facebook, X, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and visit his website, electricfelix.com. Thank you, Felix, once again, and drive safely.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Destination Charging. For more insights and to stay connected with our mission to accelerate sustainable mobility, please visit our show notes for links and further resources. Don't forget to review and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Until next time, and keep moving forward with Destination Charging.